Yeah, it's still me, Ethan Cole, 43, from Denver. On most days, I'd tell you I had a good life. A decent job in project management, a home with mountain views, a relationship that looked like stability from the outside. We were together for 5 years. Maya and I, she was warm, wrapped in chaos, the kind of woman who could make a stranger laugh and make me forget how small my own world had become. We met in the most ordinary way. A coffee shop near my office. Both of us fighting over the last blueberry muffin. She smiled, I gave in, and we ended up splitting it at a table near the window. I remember thinking this is how ordinary happiness starts, in moments so small you don't realize you're already building a life around them. Our first year together was golden. She worked in real estate, always on her phone, always closing deals. I liked her energy, her drive. She said I made her calm. I believed her. We moved in together after a year, got a dog, started talking about maybe one day something bigger, marriage, kids, but happiness has a sound. And when it goes missing, you notice. It began with her silences. The way she'd stare at her phone but not reply. How she'd lock the bathroom door when taking calls. I told myself it was work, that she deserved privacy. I wanted to believe I wasn't turning into one of those paranoid men who read too much into shadows. Then came the business trip, 3 days in Chicago. I didn't question it. She packed light, kissed me goodbye, left her perfume lingering in the hallway. That night, I texted her a goodnight message, no reply. Next day, she sent a photo from a hotel room, city view, champagne glass. But there was a reflection in the window, a man's shoulder half visible. I stared at it for a long time, pretending I didn't see what I saw, pretending that the shape wasn't real. When she came home, I asked how the trip was. She said productive. I asked who the client was. She said you wouldn't know him? I smiled. And that was the moment something in me shifted. Not broken, not yet. Just recalculated. Over the next week, I started watching her patterns, the messages, the sudden errands, the late returns. She left her laptop open once, and I saw the emails. Not love letters, just coordination. Hotel bookings, a shared Gmail draft folder, efficient, called out the man's name was Ryan, our colleague, married. I found his LinkedIn profile like it was part of a case study, not my life. I learned his wife's name, his kids' ages, where he lived. And that's when I decided I wouldn't confront her. Not yet, because anger burns out fast. But calculation lasts. So I started a new file on my work laptop, password protected, called it budget analysis. Inside it, I started recording everything: dates, times, receipts, screenshots. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, only that I wanted the truth on paper. The way I'd build a project report, structured, undeniable. It's strange how quickly deceit becomes data. Then one night, she came home late. Too late. Her lipstick was smudged, hair messy like the wind had played with it. Traffic, she said. I nodded. Later, while she slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow circles, every blade cutting the air like a metronome of my patience. She thought she was playing a small, secret game. She didn't realize I'd already started a bigger one, and mine had rules she couldn't imagine, because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to rearrange her world until she didn't recognize what was left. I spent the next few days acting, smiling at breakfast, asking about her day, pretending to listen while she talked about clients that didn't exist. She thought she was still fooling me, that her performance was airtight, but liars always overcompensate. Too many details. Too much laughter. That's how I caught the first real crack. Wednesday night, she said she had a networking dinner. I kissed her cheek, told her to have fun, then waited until the sound of her car faded down the street. I knew she wasn't going to dinner. Not in those heels, not with that perfume. I opened my laptop. The file I'd been building, budget analysis, was already thick with her patterns. I added another entry. Then I followed her. Denver traffic makes invisibility easy. A car among thousands. She went across town to a hotel near the airport, same one as before. I parked 2 rows behind her, kept my headlights off. She walked inside, phone in hand, smiling like someone free of consequence. An hour later, I watched them come out together, her and Ryan. He was tall, suit jacket open, hand on her lower back. They looked like lovers in a movie, the kind of scene that plays soft music under the ruin. They kissed before getting into his car, not rushed, not guilty, familiar. That was the moment the illusion died. But I didn't confront them, not yet. I drove home instead, calm, quiet. That calm scared me, the kind that comes when something in you finally breaks and rearranges itself into something colder. That night, I copied every file from her laptop onto a flash drive while she showered. Emails, invoices, calendar entries. And I found something I hadn't expected. It wasn't just an affair. There were financial irregularities, fake commissions, false listings. Client payments rerouted through shell accounts under her name and Ryan's. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. And she'd used my name, my home address, for one of the dummy transactions. She'd made me an accessory without me ever knowing. That's when everything clicked, the secrecy, the calls, the sudden bursts of money that didn't match her pay. It was all bigger than infidelity. She thought I was the fool in love. She didn't realize she'd built her empire of lies on my patience. I started documenting everything. I reached out to a friend in IT who owed me a favor, told him I needed to trace some personal financial leaks. He ran metadata on the files and found their pattern. For properties listed under fake names, each tied to a company Ryan's wife didn't even know existed, I knew what to do next. I created an anonymous email account and sent a few carefully chosen files to Ryan's corporate compliance department. Not enough to expose the affair, just enough to raise internal suspicion about accounting inconsistencies. Then I waited. 2 days later, Ryan was pulled into a private meeting. Maya came home that night pale and restless, phone in hand, pacing the kitchen. He's freaking out, she muttered under her breath, thinking I wasn't listening. He says someone sent. She stopped mid-sentence when she realized I was watching. What's wrong? I asked softly. Nothing, she said too quickly. Just work. I smiled, gentle, of course. That night she barely slept. I could hear her tossing beside me, her breathing uneven. Guilt has its own rhythm. I'd learned to recognize it. By morning, I'd made my decision. Revenge wasn't about making her cry. It was about balance. If she'd made me part of her lie, I'd make her part of its collapse. So I printed every document, every transaction, and placed them neatly in an envelope. Then I drove downtown to the Colorado Real Estate Regulatory Office. No signature, no return address, just the truth wrapped in quiet. When I got home, she was at the kitchen table, still in her robe, scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me with tired eyes. "You seem calm," she said. "I am," I replied. "I've accepted things." She smiled weakly, unsure what I meant, but in my head I already saw it. The way her world would start to crumble, slowly at first, then all at once, and I'd be there, watching from the calm she thought she'd broken. The storm came quietly at first, an email, a call, a silence. 3 days after I mailed the envelope, Maya's confidence began to fracture. She woke early that Monday, scrolling through her phone before her feet even hit the floor. Her jaw clenched. I pretended to still be asleep, watching the shadow of her anxiety crawl across the room. At breakfast, she'd barely touched her coffee. "You ever feel like something's following you?" she asked suddenly, her voice thin. I looked up. "What do you mean?" She shook her head, forcing a laugh. "Never mind. Just stress." But it wasn't just stress. By noon, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages she didn't answer, calls she declined. Then, around 4, she showed up at my office unannounced. Her eyes were rimmed red. "Can we talk?" she asked. standing in the doorway like a ghost. I led her to the parking lot. She looked around nervously before whispering, "Ryan's in trouble. They're investigating him. Something about money being funneled through accounts I've used. They think I'm involved." I kept my expression neutral. "Are you?" "Of course not," she snapped, her eyes widening in offense. "The practiced kind liar's perfect. They're trying to make me the scapegoat. He told me it was all legitimate. Just creative structuring. Creative structuring. That's what she called laundering." I sighed and put a hand on her shoulder. "It'll be okay," I said softly. "Tell them the truth." But she couldn't, not without telling them about us, about the affair, the money, the messages. She was trapped in the web she'd spun, and she could already feel it tightening. That night, she didn't go home. She sat in her car outside the apartment for hours, chain-smoking, staring at nothing. When she finally came in, her hands were trembling. "They froze my accounts," she said. "I can't access anything. My cards got declined. I played dumb? That's weird. Maybe call the bank." Her eyes darted toward me. "You think I don't see it? You think I don't feel it? Something's happening to me, Ethan. Things are disappearing. Files, emails, transactions, gone." I shrugged. "Maybe you should have backed them up." She looked at me like she wanted to say something sharp, dangerous, but stopped. Then she whispered, "You're different lately. Distant. I learned it from you," I said, and walked into the kitchen. She didn't follow. By the end of the week, the official notice came. Her license was under suspension pending investigation. Her company released a statement about compliance reviews. Ryan's name wasn't mentioned. His connections insulated him, at least for now. Maya didn't go to work after that. She stayed home, pacing the apartment like a trapped animal. Her phone barely left her hand. Every buzz made her flinch. One night, round midnight, I woke up and found her sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by paperwork. Her face was pale, mascara smudged. She looked up when I entered. "Who did this?" she asked quietly. I said nothing. "You think I don't know? You're the only one who could have. You with your files, your questions, your quiet little smiles." I sat on the couch across from her. "You think I ruined you? You did that yourself." Tears welled up, but she didn't cry. "I loved you," she said. "No," I corrected softly. "You used me." She stared for a long time, then whispered, "You don't understand. I never meant for it to go this far." "Neither did I." I stood up, walked back to the bedroom, and closed the door. The next morning, she was gone. Half her things missing, half left behind. No note. For the first time in months, the apartment felt still. I poured myself coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. It was a message. "You should have stopped when you had the chance." No name, no signature, but I knew who it was. Ryan. And suddenly, I realized the game wasn't finished. The message stayed on my screen for a long time. I didn't answer, didn't even breathe for a few seconds. Just stared at the words, short and clean, the kind that sound like a warning, not a threat. I deleted it, then powered the phone off. But silence doesn't erase danger. It just gives it room to breathe. By that evening, I could feel it, the unease, the shift in the air. My apartment suddenly felt too exposed, too open. The window blinds moved slightly with the draft, and I found myself checking the locks twice before bed. The next morning, a black SUV sat parked across the street, windows tinted, engine idling. It was gone an hour later, but something in me knew this wasn't over. Ryan had money, influence, and the kind of arrogance that came from always getting away with things. If his empire was cracking, he'd want someone to blame. Maya was gone. That left me. That night, I drove out past the city limits to an old diner off the highway. One of those places with flickering neon and coffee that tastes like burnt asphalt. My friend Sen, a cybersecurity analyst who owed me a few favors, met me there. He slid a laptop across the table. "You were right," he said. "They've been digging." I frowned. "Who?" "Ryan's people. Private investigators. Two dummy accounts tried to access your financial records last week. You're clean, but they're looking for leverage. Leverage for what? Sam smirked. You embarrassed someone who doesn't like to lose. He wasn't wrong. Ryan had spent years crafting his reputation. The charming businessman, the devoted husband, the man whose hands were clean no matter how dirty the work beneath them was. I'd taken that image and put a crack right through the middle. He'd want revenge, not through violence, through destruction, through control. 2 days later, I came home to find my door slightly open. Inside, nothing looked stolen, nothing broken, but I knew someone had been there. My files, the ones tied to Maya's investigation, were gone. They hadn't taken my computer, just the flash drive. It didn't matter. I had backups, hidden copies. But that wasn't the point. The point was message received. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at the city lights outside my window. The skyline blurred into streaks of amber and silver. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. What started as justice was turning into a spiral one I'd set in motion. Then, around midnight, another message came through. No number this time, just text on a secure app I hadn't used in years. You think you're in control, Ethan. You're not. You never were. She made you believe you were different. You're not. I stared at the message until it faded off the screen. Maya. So she was with him again. Or maybe she'd never left him at all. I laughed bitterly. The sound echoed through the empty apartment. All this time, I'd been fighting ghosts, trying to reclaim something that had never really existed. The next day, I drove to Ryan's office tower. 22 floors of polished glass and silence. I didn't have a plan, just the need to see him, to look at the man who thought he could play God. When I arrived, his assistant told me he wasn't in. I waited anyway. Hours passed. Then, as the sun dipped low, he appeared, calm, composed, the perfect mask of wealth. He saw me and smirked. You've made quite the mess, Ethan, he said. Maya told me you were clever. I underestimated how much. You should have left me out of it. I said, you made yourself part of it, he replied. And now you're going to learn that truth isn't the same as power. He brushed past me, and I felt a pulse of heat in my chest, not rage. Something worse, clarity, I realized. Then, that people like Ryan don't fear exposure. They fear silence. The kind that makes their lies echo louder. So I decided that night to go public. Not through the police, not through the regulators, through the media. I reached out to an investigative journalist I'd met years ago, a woman named Claire Rowe, known for burning down empires with a single headline. When she picked up the phone, I said, I've got something for you. Names, accounts, files, and I don't want credit. I just want it seen. There was a pause. You sure about this, Ethan? People like that don't forgive. I'm counting on it, I said. By the time I sent her the encrypted drive, the night sky had already turned the city into a patchwork of light and shadow. Somewhere in that shadow, I knew Ryan was waiting. And somewhere else, maybe closer than I realized, Maya was too. They'd both built their worlds on lies. And now, I was about to light a match. The night I hit send, I thought I'd feel relief, but there was none. Just that strange electric calm, the kind you get before a storm you know you've summoned yourself. I watched the city from my balcony, whiskey in hand. The lights below flickering like nerves under skin. Somewhere down there, a journalist named Claire Rowe was opening my file, the one that held everything. The transfers, the emails, the timelines. Even the names of shell companies Ryan had used to launder millions through real estate. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Local real estate mogul linked to fraud and tax evasion. The headline was sharp. The photos even sharper. Ryan leaving his office, jaw tight, no tie, surrounded by microphones. I wasn't mentioned by name. Neither was Maya. But I saw her face anyway, hidden behind the blinds of her small apartment downtown. Someone had photographed her looking out the window, fear written across her expression. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to taste the justice I'd carved from the wreckage. But instead, I felt hollow, like I'd built a perfect equation and erased myself in the process. Then, the silence broke. One evening, there was a knock on my door. 3 soft taps. I opened it, and there she was, Maya. Her hair was shorter, her eyes darker, the air between us heavy with words neither of us wanted to start with. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slow, deliberate. The city lights washed over her face. She looked older, like months had passed instead of weeks. "I read the articles," she said. "You finally did it." I didn't respond. I poured her a glass of water, set it on the table. She didn't touch it. "You ruined him," she said quietly. "You really think that makes you safe?" "Safer than before," I said. She shook her head. "You don't understand, Ethan. Ryan wasn't the top. He was just the face. The money flows higher, people you've never met. You've made enemies you can't even see." I stared at her. "Then why are you here?" Her voice broke. "Because they think I help you." There it was, the tremor beneath all her anger. "Fear." She sat down, hands shaking. "They took my car, my accounts. I've been followed for days. I don't even know who to run from anymore." For the first time since all this began, I felt something close to pity. Not forgiveness, that was beyond reach, but a quiet recognition that we'd both built the same cage. "You could have told me the truth," I said. "I wanted to," she whispered. "But I knew once you found out, you'd never look at me the same." She was right. We sat in silence for a long time. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. Then she said something that would haunt me long after that night. "He used to say you were dangerous. Not because of what you could do, but because you believed you were right." She stood up, walked to the door, and turned back once. "Be careful, Ethan. You think you've ended this. You've just started something you can't control." And then she was gone. The door closed, and with it, the last tether to the life I'd once recognized. A week later, the fallout began. Ryan was arrested on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. His assets were frozen. The story dominated headlines for days, until something new came along, as it always does. But one detail buried deep in the report caught my attention. Investigators suspect larger players remain unidentified in the laundering network. That was the echo of her warning. I started noticing things again. The SUV back across the street, the unknown number calling once a night, and hanging up after a single ring. Nothing overt, just reminders. Still, I didn't run. I went to work, came home, made coffee, kept living, because this was never about escape. It was about truth, and truth always comes with a cost. Late one evening, as the first snow began to fall, I sat at my desk and opened a new document. No codes, no hidden files, just a blank page. I began typing. "My name is Ethan Cole. I believed love could make people honest. I was wrong. But in the ruins of that belief, I found something stronger, clarity." I stopped, saved the file, and titled it simply, "After." Then I closed the laptop, leaned back, and listened to the hum of the city beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, Maya was running from the same shadows she helped build. Somewhere else, men in suits were deciding how deep the truth would go. As for me, I wasn't hiding anymore. I'd already burned everything I could lose, and if they came for me, I'd be ready. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the one thing they could never corrupt, the truth I wrote myself.